In this episode, we are talking about AirPods Pro, AirPods Max, next generations of all of these things, when you should upgrade your iPhone, and a bunch more stuff, so stay tuned, and let's get into your questions. Team Kinetics asks, I gave answers. I swapped my iPhone 12 Pro Max for the iPhone 15 Pro. Battery life is exceptional, cameras are great, loving it, feels significantly like a newer phone. How often do you think consumers should upgrade phones, and how often do you think Apple expects consumers to upgrade? Great question, and we've been talking a little bit about in the last video when you should upgrade Macs and things like that. Basically, when you feel the need to. If your phone is not performing the way that you want it to, that is a great time to do it. Now for me, and I think a lot of people, I'm on a 2-year upgrade cycle with my carrier, like it's kind of financed through that, and I think a lot of people do kind of tend to upgrade once that initial thing is paid off. But I think this kind of ties into the fact that Apple does do their events at the same time every year, which means that you can go on a 1-year plan with Apple's own iPhone trade-in plan, where you basically give your phone back and then you get the next one, and kind of the old phone becomes your deposit, I guess. Or you can do a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan with a carrier, and they all make sense because we know when they're going to be coming out. Now I think 2 to 3 years is about right for phones, but the old phones are not like out of date, they're not unusable anymore. If you're not a big photographer, like for example, if you've not got kids who you want to be able to take snaps of really quickly and be able to take good pictures, probably doesn't matter that much to you whether it's the latest and greatest. I do think though, when you've got younger kids and you are hanging out with them a lot of the time, you want to be able to capture those memories in the best way that you possibly can for the future. And I think that's the reason that a lot of people do upgrade their iPhones on the regular. So I think 2 to 3 years is fine. I think 4 years you will probably not really miss out on a huge amount of new features, but obviously everything will start to slow down a little bit. And up to 7 years, to be fair, is normally the kind of support length that we get. All of those answers are fine. Evan Rogers asks, I gave answers. If you could create one new EU regulation targeting Apple, what would it be? I'd choose a restoration of target display mode on iMacs, e.g. allow all iMacs to be external displays for other computers. Now, this is a decent idea. I don't mind this at all. I think the fact that the EU is regulating all of this stuff is not necessarily a good thing. I'm not a fan of the USB-C shift, because with a lightning cable you kind of knew what you were getting, whereas with USB-C cables it could be anything. It could be just power delivery, it could do all of the good stuff, it could, basically not even work. We've got devices in the house that will not work with some USB cables. They're not particularly high powered or anything like that, they just don't like them. At least with Lightning you knew where you were. With the RCS stuff, this is not necessarily directly from the EU, this is kind of getting ahead of potential regulation, I guess. I don't think that the government should be regulating what standards are put into different devices. That's just my thought on it. I think that should be down to the market. If people are happy with using Lightning, they can buy that. If people hated Lightning so much, they would stop buying iPhones. They didn't, because the iPhone as a package is a better device than most Android phones. I think that's fair. In terms of what I would legislate for, what would I like to force Apple to do? I mean, we've got the side-loading thing coming, which again, I'm not particularly a big fan of. There's not really much that I want Apple to do that they're not doing already. I think the iMac thing is really good. You can basically, if you use OpenCore, use them as an AirPlay target, so you can kind of use them as a wireless monitor, and there's also always been third-party stuff that you can do that with. And obviously we've got people like Luke Miani, who is going out there and kind of putting LCD controller boards into iMacs so that you can use those 5K displays, not unlike what I did with the iPad display that is in this Mac Mini Macintosh thing. That's got an LCD controller board, there is no iPad in there, there's just the display from it. I don't know. I would really like it if Apple was basically creating the boards that go into things like the Mac Mini and the MacBook Air and stuff like that in a more modular way. So not where you can change the RAM out, where you can change the CPU out, but where you change the whole logic board. So you could essentially upgrade an entire MacBook Air to the latest version. So upgrading an M1 MacBook Air to an M3 MacBook Air, keep the same display, keep the same keyboard and trackpad and battery and all of that stuff, and just literally swap out the brain, because your ports are in the same place, your display connector's not really changing over time that much. That would be quite good, because that would certainly minimize e-waste as long as these displays stay intact. I think that's a pretty good shout. Marcin Kowalczyk asks, IK answers, since Apple is now pushing ray tracing, mesh shaders and other gaming focused technologies, do you suspect we are on the cusp of AAA gaming coming to the Mac in 2 to 3 years time, or maybe sooner? We're already there. Things like the Resident Evil remake, which you're going to be able to get on the iPhone, unbelievable. So that's Resident Evil 4 remake and Village, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's being brought to the Mac pretty quickly. The bottleneck is still, as always, developers. It's not a case of the hardware not being good enough. The hardware is good enough to run these games, not necessarily on the highest settings, not the same way as you would with a 4080, but in a very, very playable way. And I think that what Apple should probably be looking at is universal binaries that don't give the user control over the graphics settings and detail levels and frame rates. Just automatically set them to the right thing for that system and just don't give control. I don't think there's any reason to, because Apple can detect the hardware you're using very simply and just give you the right gaming experience. I don't think we want to play around with those settings. It's much better to just open a game and play it. But certainly with Game Porting Toolkit and Game Mode on macOS Sonoma, Apple's clearly got some ambition here. Pokemon Scarlet 18 asks, IK answers, are we still getting that larger Apple Watch Ultra? I'm salivating for a bigger screen. I don't think so. I mean, they still could, but the Apple Watch Ultra is already too big. It's just too big. I tried it on in the Apple Store. It feels horrible. It's far too big. I think what they might do is there are quite chunky bezels on the inside of that Apple Watch display. Potentially push out a little bit into the bezels, keep the titanium around the edge, but actually just like fill the space that we've got in there. I don't think the watch itself should be any bigger, because that would be just horrible, horrible, horrible to wear. Pokemon Scarlet 18 asks, IK answers, how powerful do you think the M5 Max will be? Will we get a redesign with the M5 chip? And any chance they go to 2 nanometers? How's the roadmap looking for the Mac? I love using my Mac and can't imagine using any other computer. So we talked a lot yesterday about the roadmap for Macs going forward and the chips, so you can find that up here if you want to watch the full video. But the Cliff Notes version is M5, yes, we could be looking at 2 nanometer by then. M7 is when we're looking at going to chiplet designs. In terms of redesign of the MacBook Pros, I think everyone's pretty happy with the design right now. Typically they last for about 4 years, so we would be looking 2021, so 2025 is likely to be around the time that we could expect some sort of redesign. That's also when we're looking at potentially getting OLED displays in there instead of the mini LED that we've got right now. So that kind of makes sense. They might push the screens out slightly bigger. They might change the way that things work, and maybe when the OLED is in there, then maybe we've got enough room to get Face ID in. That's something that I'm really waiting for with the Macs. I would love to get Face ID on there. Currently the issue is the depth, so the sensors are deeper than the lid of a MacBook, and once those shrink down, that's when that notch will make so much more sense. Maybe even a dynamic island, who knows. Pokemon Scarlet 18 asks, IK answers, now that Gurman has told us that AirPods Pro redesign is coming in 2025, what can we expect? When will they go stemless? Any chance we get an 8-hour battery life per bud? With Samsung buds, even the lowest model gets 8 hours of battery life in each bud. Why can't Apple do it? Will there be a touchscreen on the case, or will we get a smarter case? Will Apple ever make AirPods with built-in storage to store music? Will they turn into hearing aids with those models? What can we expect? Lossless? Lossless is already in the Pros, it just only works with the Vision Pro that you can't buy yet. So that's fine, we've already got that. But that's using ultra-wideband, so ultra-wideband chips like in the AirTags, that kind of stuff, to do really close, basically because they know you're going to be wearing the Vision Pro headset on your head and the AirPods are going to be right next to you. They know the distance is going to be pretty short, so that's going to work. Distance is a problem when you're going to lossless. So in terms of other stuff, I don't think the redesign is going to be drastic. I think we might get slightly slimmer. I think they're still going to have stems, because why would we not have stems? The good thing about stems is you know which way they're supposed to go around in your ears. They get reasonably good microphones compared to a lot of other earbuds, because those beam-forming mics can actually point towards your face. That's very helpful. Hearing aid stuff, that already exists. Apple's already built that in a little bit. in terms of transparency and using your case as a microphone and things like that. Other stuff, I don't know. I can't imagine that we're going to get a smart case with a screen on it. That sounds like the worst idea I've ever heard. Pokemon Scarlet 18 asks, iCave answers, will Apple make smart home devices? They have so much money, why don't they sell their own products? I think the big thing here is that Apple does well with one concept that a lot of other companies don't, which is knowing when to say no. They don't make everything, because if they made everything, their engineering resource gets spread too wide. The products themselves, there'll be too many teams working on different things, which means that the products individually won't integrate so well together, which just basically makes the experience worse. What Apple does really well is offer their standards out for things like HomeKit, which is part of Thread or Matter, or one of those two. I can never remember which one it is. So that other people can make stuff that will work with HomeKit, and now it's more open source. That means there's going to be even more people making products that work with it. Apple doesn't need to do everything. If you remember back in the day, people were wanting Apple to make their own TV set, as opposed to having an Apple TV box that you can attach to any TV set. And for Apple, there's no point in doing that, because TV sets themselves are very low profit margin things, whereas the TV box, they can put their technology in it. It works with any TV panel. They don't have to worry about shipping huge devices for low cost. It makes far more sense. So let other people do stuff. If Apple makes everything, then they're just going to get even more antitrust problems. Pokemon Scarlet 18 asks, iCave answers, will Apple give the AirPods Max 2 a big update? Can we get a new design and lossless? How will people wear AirPods Max with the Vision Pro, as the Vision Pro already has its own strap that goes over the head? They need a better design. So the over-the-head strap on the Vision Pro is removable. That's not an issue at all. Then they may redesign for this, but from what we're hearing right now, the next version of AirPods Max is going to be exactly what it is now, exactly the same chips, possibly some new colours, and a USB-C port. They're not looking to change anything really at all drastically. I don't think it's a big enough product for Apple to actually put a huge amount of engineering into. I don't think enough people own them. I don't think it's really viable as a product, unfortunately. Certainly not at the price it is now. If they were able to reduce the price down to somewhere in the 300 camp, something, $300, $299 to $350, I think they would do far better. But right now you've got Beats headphones that do far more stuff than AirPods Max, which is really depressing. And we've also just had so many problems with the aluminium ear cups, with condensation, with all of that sort of stuff. I don't think they're in any rush to replace these right now. If anything, they may just get discontinued instead. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.